Hey, Tesla fans, welcome to another episode of the Tesla Universe podcast. I'm your host, Cameron Prince. Hope everyone had a nice Thanksgiving and welcome back. This week, we're going to start off with Miss Muzar since we skipped her last week. We're going to look at why Tesla was cremated instead of buried. And also, we hope that Miss Muzar can answer the question of why Tesla had no will. Now, before we kick off part 4 of the Charlotte Muzar video, I wanted to show you the clips of the interview that were actually used in the Master of Lightning documentary. So let's take a look at those now.
Kosanovich had asked the locksmith to come and open the safe, thinking there might be a testament, a will, in the safe.
A will was never located.
And there was a lot of talk then about secret weapons and negotiations with the USSR. There was all kind of talk. A number of people called me and asked me, did I see in the hotel room a certain kind of a box, you know? They were looking for some secret contraption that Tesla had invented. I never saw anything like that.
So there you see only a few seconds of the interview was actually used in the documentary. Miss Muzar had a lot more to say, but I know they were limited on time, and I suppose that they made it fit the best they could. Now we're going to get right into part 4 of the full interview, and I wanted to point something out before we start it. You may have caught on in the previous parts of the interview that Miss Muzar was speaking to someone off camera that wasn't necessarily the main guy we've been hearing all along asking her questions. And in this particular clip, when we start talking about burial versus cremation, this person that Miss Muzar is speaking to actually responds, and you can hear his voice. Now, he's got something very interesting to say about a letter that was received by the funeral home that received Tesla's body. So I want you to pay close attention to that. If you're like me, you're going to be wondering who that was that she was talking to. So let's welcome back Miss Muzar in part 4 of her video interview.
Trunk that was going to go down the hole. I never saw them. And then when I got to Belgrade, I handed the package over to the museum. And that's all. And the next time I was there at the opening of the museum, and that time they had them in the onyx little urn. Beautiful thing. But now I see they've changed it. They have the ashes in a sphere. But that's the way. And it was, when I thought of it, I thought, well, Tesla's finally going home, All the time, while Mr. Kosanovich was alive, and the ashes were here, I mentioned it a couple of times. He says, "Moment," he had in mind, he had the feeling that some memorial or monument might be raised to Tesla in the United States, and maybe his ashes could be left there, here in the United States. But nothing like that was undertaken or done. So that's how Tesla's ashes got to Belgrade, to the museum.
Maybe you can help us with another controversy here then. Tesla, and I was very interested to hear you say that Kosanovich also was Byzantine Orthodox, and yet cremation is against the rules of that religion.
At the funeral, there was an argument because the Serbian metropole and others in New York, the hierarchy of the Orthodox, they were asked to officiate with the clergy there and for a day or two they debated back and forth. They didn't want to agree. they finally agreed and participated because it was Tesla.
Tell us more. I don't quite understand who was arguing for one thing, who was arguing for another.
The priest, the Orthodox priest says we cannot participate because Tesla is going to be cremated. It's against our rules and religion and so forth. But in the end, they were won over and they did participate.
Who won them over?
I guess the nephew. Who else? He was son of a Orthodox priest, so forth. I have no idea, but I know there was discussion and debate over it, and it was sort of touch and go whether Tesla will have Orthodox presiding also over the services.
Was there any comment at the time whether or not Tesla was still practicing his Orthodox religion, or was there talk that he really wasn't practicing his religion, or did you ever hear anything like that?
I don't think any of the Tesla family practiced, because this generation, there were no priests. Their fathers were, because both of Tesla's sisters married Orthodox priests, but their children, no. No, they were not religious in that sense.
Now, I know that you think, maybe this is, I don't know if this is aggravating you or not, I'll stop.
No, it's all right.
But it seems to me that a decision was made to cremate him initially. In other words, that was the preferred method of treating the body. Why did that come? Why was that more advantageous than just a normal burial?
Well, I'm about why they decided to cremate rather than burial. My own opinion of that today, as things were then, would be the war was on. How are they going to get the body to Yugoslavia if he should be buried, if they want him buried there? If he's buried here in the United States, where would he be buried? And how? And the simplest way was for cremation. And I don't know, I don't know if you know it, but Yugoslavs are very much for cremation, aren't they?
I'm still doubtful about that cremation idea, because I found a document written after Tesla died that he was supposed to be buried.
By whom?
I found a document in a funeral home, in Frank Campbell Funeral Home. But the date of that document was January 11th. I still do not know what day he was cremated.
It was after January 12th.
No, I know it was after January 12th, but what
Was it the day after, 2 days after, 3?
I don't remember. I remember. And I think then about the cremation and the Orthodox priests participating, I thought it was sort of tacitly understood that the body would be escorted by the family and close friends up to Ferncliff and then eventually buried. That's how.
She's talking to you, and you should keep talking to me. Okay, enough of that subject.
Right.
It's obviously a controversial subject.
Well, I don't know much about. I don't know too much about this, but except that there was some controversy about whether the priest will participate or not, and Mr. Kosanovich thought that Tesla, as son of a Orthodox priest, should, and being born in the religion, should have the services of the Orthodox clergy.
Now, why would a great man like Nikola Tesla, who was also, well, he was a dreamer, but he was a practical man, why would he not leave a will?
Someone says he was a practical man. I don't think he was very practical. His head was in the clouds. His head was full of formulas and inventions and all that. And I don't think he really was aware of practical things. Because when he was at his height, he always had people working for him who did all of these things. And then later on, he fell upon his own. He didn't have anyone to look after him. And I said, I belonged to a club, and they asked me to give a little speech on Tesla. And I remember one of the points I made in there is, Tesla, if what he needed badly, more than anything else, was a good business manager. If he had that, he would have had a will, he would not have died penniless, he would know how much money is going out, what he's doing, and so forth. See, but he didn't have that. He was a man who worked alone, more or less.
Now, you know, the last 20 or 30 years, well, first of all, Tesla, not too long before he died, said that people were trying to steal his ideas. And he said that the British were trying to steal his ideas. He said the Russians were trying to steal his ideas. He gave one more example. I think the Germans. Okay? So this is World War II, and you know, so that's not so unbelievable that this will be going on. Do you capture the times for us and tell us what that there's spies everywhere, and were there spies everywhere during those days? Was there a lot of espionage, or was there a lot of panic about espionage? How did it feel during that period?
The question is, were there many spies around? Spies don't walk around with buttons or signs, I am a spy. Who knows? Who knows? I'm sure there were. I'm sure there were. Because everybody was out to win. And you win by knowing the other guy's secrets.
Did you ever hear of an exotic character named George Sylvester Viereck?
Viereck?
Viereck. He was
No.
a German poet.
No, I'd never heard of that name.
He was one of Tesla's best friends in the 30s.
Uh-huh.
Kind of a suspicious character. And I just wondered if you'd ever heard any stories involved.
Not a word.
Let's see. Tell me about Ken Sweezey. What kind of a person was he?
Ken Sweezey was a wonderful bear of a man. He lived in Brooklyn. He lived and died in the house he was born in Brooklyn. He adored Tesla, and he had many nighttime calls, conversations with him. And he was hoping to write, I think, a biography before he died. But he was a science writer. He published a couple of books. One is After Dinner Magic. They're little tricks, you know. Kids in the neighborhood used to collect at his place, like a club, and he used them for models of these various tricks. And he, the last thing he published, I have a copy, is a book of formulas and so forth. He was a loner, and he was invited to come to Yugoslavia in '57 as guest of the Tesla Museum, which he accepted. He had a very nice trip there. He went to Turkey to try to find Noah's Ark. And he was a very unique fellow.
Now he was close to Tesla.
Very close.
And what was it that sparked that relationship? Why would this young man and this older man, why did he take him into his, did he ever tell you why he thought that might have happened?
No. My conversations, association with Sweezey never covered the stage of his life, when and how he got. I think he went to interview him as a youngster, in school or something like that, and just followed his career after that.
Okay, now you said you worked with John J. O'Neill.
Yeah.
Tell me, what was O'Neill like?
O'Neill was a little fragile guy, you'd think. John J. O'Neill I'm talking about. He was, he wrote for the New York Times, didn't he? He was a real fragile, wispy guy. And he was always trying to concentrate or bring forth some supernatural phenomena, things like that. And I met him when he came to interview Mr. Kosanovich after Tesla's death when he was going to write the biography. And then I was with the United Committee of South Slavic Americans in New York, and we had him come to the office and autograph a lot of his books so that we use it as a promotion and a fundraising gimmick. But, and he was much older, I think, than Sweezey, but very fragile guy.
He seems to endorse the idea that Tesla at least spent a lot of the later part of his life indulging in mystical kinds of thoughts. What do you think of that?
About Tesla's time and mystical thought, all I know is, as they say, is what I read about it. And Mr. Krasavich always sort of discounted that and didn't want to hear too much about it.
Okay.
But I would think that Tesla would be more practical than to go in for some of these mystical things. Who knows? They have to make everything. The media, look what they're doing today with these ice skaters, huh? They make news. They have to write something, make it exciting, whether there's any substance there or not. They get a little thread here and they weave a whole piece of cloth out of it. And I think they do that to almost everybody. And some of this could, I'm sure, apply to Tesla. Like towards the end of his life when he was having interviews on his birthday. He'd call the news in, newspaper men. And they'd always look for the odd, different pronouncements and, something sensational. That's what they were looking for. They weren't really interested in what he had to say, practical things, because that doesn't sell newspapers.
All right, what did you think? Me personally, I still find the whole business of cremation versus burial fishy. I know she said that it was probably done for the purposes of easing transportation of the ashes or the remains. I'm just not really buying that. I think if they wanted to move Tesla's body from New York to Serbia, they could do that. Maybe it was an issue of storage. Who knows? We may never know. But I am curious about the letter that the person mentions. I wonder who sent the letter, and why did the funeral home ignore the letter? It seems like every time we get close to an answer to a question like this about Tesla, it just leads to more questions. So let's get on with the Colorado Springs model update. Now, I've made some significant advances recently with my work to build the model, and thought I would tell you about it. Probably the most significant is, in my mind, previously, I considered these to be the same wall. These two pictures, the back wall being the one on the left and the front wall being the one on the right. As we can see here, we've got Tesla's. This was similar to his breaker panel or fuse box that's over here on the far right. And I was under the impression that these were the same side wall, the front end leading back to the back end. But in examining the photos, and I have been doing some examining of the photos, the floorboards aren't in a line to do that. It doesn't work. Also, the studs are different in one picture to the other, toward the middle where they should meet. So I finally determined that this is actually a picture of the back wall. This is a picture of the side wall. And it should actually be like this instead of flat. So that was kind of neat to figure out. Now, one of the things that I've been discussing with Richard We were talking about the two rooms, and let's show you this diagram. This is from Richard's book. And as you can see, the doorway is right here. So this would be the west. This is west facing. The door is facing toward the west. So that means the back wall is the east wall. And this picture here with Tesla and the breaker panel or fuse box, power entry point, whatever you want to call it, that is going to be the north wall that we're looking at back here. So this other picture is going to be the east wall. And Richard and I were talking about the rooms. So the rooms on either corner of the front of the building, the west side of the building, Richard is estimating at 10 by 15. Now, we were talking about what Tesla may have had in this room that is on the southwest corner, because there's no pictures of it. We don't really even know if there was a room on that corner, but it stands to reason, Tesla being so concerned with balance and synergy and that sort of thing, it makes sense. And there's a structural element here to consider too, because that whole north wall is only coming down several feet before a big open space. So there's nothing to support that front wall where the opening is over the capacitors and the rotary spark gap. So that room, the wall of that room or rooms would help support that front wall over that opening. So it stands to reason there is a room. And we got to talking about what might be in that room. And theories that we both came up with, tools, supplies, materials. Maybe Tesla had a bedroom there. Highly unlikely because it was so cold. We do know that there was a heater in the one room, an electric heater. But I'm sure with no insulation, no real walls other than the exterior wall, it would be very difficult to keep this building anywhere near comfortable for sleeping. So we also ruled out tools, or potentially ruled them out, because we were able to see, and I'll zoom this in on the screen, but in this back corner, this back left corner, let's go ahead and bring that up in Photoshop. So take a look here. We've got what looks to be a hand drill. We've got a shelf here, or a hanger, and then a shelf below it, which appears to contain screwdrivers and pliers and that sort of thing. So I emailed Richard and I said, hey, I found Tesla's tools. And I sent him an enlargement of the photos, and he had this to say: those are Mr. Kolman Czito's tools. Tesla ordered Mr. Czito out to Colorado with the admonition that George Sheriff, Tesla's manager in his office back in New York, tell Czito to bring all his tools, probably in a trunk in the baggage car. The scissors are for sheet metal with long hands for mechanical advantage, and very short jaws, and they could cut heavy cable as well. Richard says Tesla would soon send Czito back, as Sheriff kept making excuses to Tesla that the special brake work was going slow with Mr. Czito gone. So Tesla was corresponding with Mr. Sheriff almost daily, giving him instructions for projects and other things that were happening back in New York while Tesla was in Colorado. And Mr. Czito was highly skilled, and Tesla was torn as to where to have him actually work. So Mr. Czito came to Colorado for a short period of time, and then was dispatched back to New York to complete this break. Now, by break, Tesla was speaking of a spark gap, a rotary spark gap, and Czito was busy working on that. So the drill hanging on the wall, likewise, is huge with a chest brace common to that period, almost like a portable drill press. Richard said his grandfather was a carpenter and had one of these in his large workshop. So thanks for the background there, Richard. Now, if we go back to the photo and take a look again, one of the things that baffled me was this white thing hanging down. And at first it looked like it was almost inside the primary secondary, but in closer examination, it's actually hanging in between the primary secondary and the wall, but it's in front of the shelf with the tools on it, but it's also behind the drill. And I'm like, what could this possibly be? Well, when I finally figured out that I was looking at these photos incorrectly, it became very apparent what it is. This is actually that small window on the back of the building. So this is probably the best photo of the window. And you can see it's really white, really like very prominent in the photo. Let's find this photo in Photoshop so I can zoom in on it for you. Okay, so there it is. Let's zoom this guy in. So notice how it's like almost lit up. Well, the reason it's lit up, if we go back and look at number 5 here. Let's hide that layer. If you notice, it has crinkles. It has wrinkles in it. And what I believe this is a piece of foil. It's attached to the back wall, and then it's draping over the workbench or shelf there with the tools. And I believe Tesla used that as a form of curtain. And the reason it's so prominent and highlighted there in the photo is because it's reflecting all that light off the snow. So it's acting as a reflector, and that's why it's so bright. So there you have it. We're learning new things about Tesla's lab even 100 years later. So that was pretty interesting, pretty fun. And if we go back to the model, I kind of gave it away with that, but take a look at this. So there's an overlay of the new studs, the new rafters. The first section of the roof is finished. And you can see this is probably my best match so far. Even the wall boards behind the studs, the seams where they meet, align with the photo very well. So I'm very pleased with this. I think I'm really, really close. Let's take a look at SketchUp, and I can show you what it looks like there. So I'm in the middle working on those rafters. You can see they're sticking out. I haven't trimmed them yet because I'm adjusting their placement. I think I'm pretty well satisfied with where they're at, and we'll be trimming those off shortly. And take a look at a view of the lab that's never been seen before. So there's looking down from that first section of the roof. So it's coming along nicely. Still not ready to say I'm ready to start building yet. This is one of those things where if you make a mistake early on, there's going to be a lot of rework to fix it. So I've kind of pretty well resigned myself to the fact that I'm going to get this model done within SketchUp before I start actually in the real world building it. So I'm working feverishly on this, trying to get it done because I want to get my hands dirty. So it's coming along, making good progress, and I'll keep you updated. All right. Well, I think that's it for tonight. I think we've covered everything we needed to cover. So until next time, keep sparking. Thanks for watching. I appreciate your time and attention. We'll see you next week.